And my younger one already has her baby laptop, and she comes and she sits next to me and she'll be like, I'm sending out emails. And, when you ask her about how her day went, she'll say she had a meeting with her teacher Shafs and teacher Rika and then had lunch and took a nap. So, it got me thinking, like, what will the world be like when they get older, they become mothers? And, I don't want them to go through the struggle of, what women and in our generation go through. And sure, everything looks good from the outside, but I have spoken to enough women now to realize that there is a problem inside, deep down inside, where we don't have enough options and support in place for us. Hi, my name is Khatija. I am Pakistani by origin. I was born and raised in Malaysia, and I came to Singapore 17 years ago. Moxie is really, was born out of, my own insight, my own struggles as a working woman. So I've been really fortunate to work for great companies and great bosses. I had 2 kids under 2. And I was searching for women-friendly companies that had more flexible work options. So, job sharing or part-time work options where I could still have a meaningful career and be a present parent at the same time. And I struggled to find that. So when I tried to Google part-time jobs, I found very jobs like dog walker or admin assistants. And, it wasn't related to the past 9 years of experience that I had had at that time. So I wanted to look for something meaningful that I could do with my own time, but also be around for my kids. And so I decided to start, researching more, and I started to dig deep to look at the data. And what I found was quite staggering. Working with companies like Unilever and Zespri were great. I think they're very supportive employers. I remember in particular, I had just started my traineeship in Unilever, and my father fell very sick. He was on a business trip in China. In a remote village. He had a heart attack, and I had to rush down with my mom. And at that time, I was really worried about how this was going to pan out. But I did speak to my manager at that time, and they were kind enough to let me go and work remotely from them. So we were in China for 3 weeks until it was safe enough for him to fly back. I remember feeling very nervous about this because I had just landed my dream job after months and months and after so many companies that I had applied to. But, they were amazing. And I think, I've realized that it's really the support of, of good bosses that can help keep your career going and that can help you flourish. So I really appreciated that. There were also times when, we were starting a family and I needed some more support there. I think where things were not where I identified certain gaps were, when I was interviewing for certain roles. And when the moment they would see a ring on my finger, they would ask, so are you planning to have kids? And that for me was even if I am, like, why are you asking me that question, right? Like, where are we going to with this? So those questions early on in my career did make me wonder why. But, when you're young, you don't really know how to respond, or you don't really know what to do about it. In another occasion, I remember one of my earlier jobs working in a sales role, my manager at that time, as he was handing the contract over, making a comment like, oh, we could use a good-looking girl in our team, as if my qualifications didn't matter, as if my education didn't matter. And that kind of, made me feel not so good about landing the job. But again, you're young, you don't really see anything. The big moment was when I was trying to pitch a job share role. And job share at that time, after having spoken to, I think I spoke to about 30 job share pairs around the world, doing it in Australia, in the UK, and they were doing it comfortably. And when I tried to pitch it in Asia, there was a general sense that oh, there's an increase in cost. I have to increase 20% of my overheads in order to accommodate and break up a job into two, and accountability-wise, it becomes a problem. And I didn't understand that at that time, because if it's happening in other parts of the world, why can't it happen here? So that for me it just didn't make sense. Like, it just didn't click anymore. And I was like, something has to be done. Because the problem is still here. In Asia, we also want to progress our careers while being there for our kids, even though we have support, we have help here, we have grandparents around us, but we also want to pursue a career. How did things transition out of Zespri? I decided that, I wanted to spend more time at home and do something a bit more flexible with my time, and also pursue my passion in wanting to do something in this space of women empowerment and women in the workplace. And so I very bravely pitched the idea to my boss at that time, that I wanted to take this break and ask for a sabbatical for a year to explore this. Moxie is really, was born out of, my own insight, my own struggles. It's the first ever platform in Asia that allows women to openly evaluate and anonymously evaluate their employers and how women-friendly their culture and workplace environments are. If I was to put it in the most easiest way to understand, it's the Glassdoor for women. So it's where women can go and find what are women-friendly companies, what is the level of support across 5 key metrics that matter to women, and it's a data source for women to make better decisions on which kind of companies to work for. And how we do that is that we create a safe space for women to share their feedback as insiders' perspectives. We then aggregate the data and we publish it on a dashboard. So when you go to the MOXY website, we have a whole dashboard of companies, and you can see information on how, whether the work culture, what the work culture is like, whether it's meaningful work, whether there's a sense of belonging, what employer responsiveness looks like, do you have an equal voice in meetings and discussions, do you have a male ally to support your career progression, and what flexibility looks like in that company. So the way I see it, I envision Moxie to be the go-to platform for women who don't want to have to pick between life and work, and who want to be able to pursue their career while being, amazing moms and present parents. Aside from being a data-driven platform, which will, hopefully give women and empower them to make better decisions on which companies to work for, my vision for Moxie is to eventually also host more flexible, more part-time jobs and make structural changes in the workplace for women. I think there's a lot more that needs to be done in the way jobs are designed for women in order to make it more versatile, in order to make it easier for women to be able to balance both life and work. There needs to be a certain amount of restructuring that needs to happen, and I hope Moxie can do that and will be able to post more flexible jobs and opportunities on the platform. So in Asia, the great thing is that we do have, our support systems, we have domestic help here. But I think what I've come across is, burnout levels are really high in Asia. So 1 in 3 women report feeling burnt out in Asia, and almost half of them experience microaggressions in the workplace. And only half of them, 1 in 2 women actually feel comfortable enough reporting the microaggression. So microaggressions can be anything, in terms of feeling excluded from the workplace, or from certain meetings, or being asked to, take notes during meetings. And only 1 in 2 women feel safe enough to report that, because they either feel like it's not significant enough to say anything, or nothing will be done once they report it. So I think there's a lot of these, biases and hidden biases, unconscious biases, deep-rooted in the Asian culture that, we don't even realize there is. What problem am I trying to solve with Moxie? Now, we've made incredible strides in closing the gender gap in education, and even when you're first entering the workforce, just as many men as women enter the workforce. But there's something that happens between the mid to senior levels of career progression for a woman. So more than half of women in their mid-careers drop off, and that's why we end up with just 2 out of 10 women in leadership positions in Asia. And the reason why that happens is there's a lack of flexibility. 83% of women who have quit their jobs in the last year did it because of a lack of flexibility. And 97% don't feel comfortable enough asking for flexibility because it affects career progression. And I think that just goes to show that a lack of flexible and inclusive policies is the main reason why women drop out of the workforce. So I think structural changes need to take place. And that's really what Moxie aims to do. We hope to use data to help employers and help companies redefine, restructure their jobs and their policies to support women better. Having those two children, it made me change my perspective of how I was spending my time. If I was going to, spend time with them, I wanted to spend quality time with them, and make sure that anything that was going to take me away from that needed to be meaningful enough to justify me taking that time away. So firstly, I wanted to work on something that had impact and was meaningful enough to work on. And then secondly, it got me thinking, because I have two very ambitious daughters. And, one of them, my older one, so Misha, is already debating whether she wants to be an astronaut or a vet. And my younger one already has her baby laptop, and she comes and she sits next to me and she'll be like, I'm sending out emails. And, when you ask her about how her day went, she'll say she had a meeting with her teacher Shafs and teacher Rika, and then had lunch and took a nap. So, it got me thinking, like, what will the world be like when they get older, they become mothers? And, I don't want them to go through the struggle of, what women and in our generation go through. And sure, everything looks good from the outside, but I have spoken to enough women now to realize that there is a problem inside, deep down inside, where we don't have enough options and support in place for us. And I think it's not just about reaching the top, it's about the journey on the way to the top. How inclusive is the work environment that you're working in? How supportive are your bosses? How is the level of feedback that you're getting, during reviews? Is it specific feedback? Do you have male allies and sponsors helping you along the way? I recently learned that actually you can ask for help, and you can ask for someone to sponsor you through your career. I didn't know that. I wish I did, because I feel like the only sponsors I had, and they were great sponsors, were the ones that recruited me into the job. But actually you can look beyond. So it's really the journey of how your career is shaping up, and the experiences you're having in that company along the way that I think is crucial to a woman's success as well. Don't be afraid to ask. My advice to a young girl who's looking to go into this space of promoting gender equality, it's going to take us 286 years to close the economic gender gap. 14 years for education, I think it was about 186 years for political, but 286 years for the economic gender gap. So we're just getting started, and there's a lot more work that needs to be done. And I think one more key enabler is to let go of perfection. So I started off as a perfectionist. I had to do a lot of trial and error last year to get comfortable with, failure and making mistakes. And I think we hold ourselves to very high standards and are so afraid to make mistakes. And I think that's completely fine, because there's always something to learn from making mistakes, and to not wait for everything to be perfect.